The red phone on the president's desk pulsed with a malevolent light. It was 2:50 a.m. The president had been asleep for barely 2 hours, but he was instantly awake, heart pounding. The line was always open to the White House Situation Room, just in case. He had never received a call on this line, until now.
Mr. President, I'm sorry to wake you, but we have a situation.
What's happened?
We have a credible launch detection, sir. Multiple ICBMs. Trajectory suggests the continental United States.
Estimated time to impact?
10 minutes, sir.
The president hurried down the corridors of the White House, each step echoing the urgency of the situation. The weight of the world, the fate of millions, suddenly rested on his shoulders. The clock was ticking. The White House Situation Room, usually a hive of activity, was eerily quiet. The president strode in, his face grim, the weight of the world seemingly on his shoulders. His eyes scanned the faces of his advisors, each one reflecting the tension of the moment. General James, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, stood ramrod straight, his face etched with concern and determination. The gravity of the situation was mirrored in the eyes of every military leader present. Dr. Rachel Kim, the National Security Advisor, was already on a secure line, her voice barely a murmur as she relayed critical information. The room was filled with the quiet hum of urgent phone calls and whispered conversations. Secretary of Defense Mark Davis and Chief of Staff Emily Patel looked up as the president entered, their expressions mirroring the gravity of the situation. The air was thick with tension, every advisor acutely aware of the stakes.
Mr. President, this is it. This is what we've planned for. This is what we've trained for, what we've feared, and what we must now face head-on.
Large screens flickered to life, displaying a map of the world, each detail meticulously laid out. The map was dotted with red, each dot representing a potential threat. Blinking red dots arced across the Atlantic, representing the incoming missiles, a sight that sent chills down the spine of everyone in the room. Dr. Kim hung up the phone and turned to the president, her face pale but resolute.
Sir, it's confirmed. Multiple launches detected by NORAD and confirmed by our allies. It's them. The confirmation was a hammer blow, the reality of the situation sinking in.
Her words hung in the air, heavy with dread, as the room fell into a tense silence. The president sank into his chair at the head of the table, absorbing the magnitude of the information, the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. He knew that the decisions he made in the next few minutes could determine the fate of millions. He had 10 minutes to make decisions that could determine the fate of the world. 10 minutes to act decisively and wisely.
What are our options? We need to consider every possible scenario.
General James unrolled a map on the table, his finger tracing potential target areas with precision. Each target was a critical point, each decision a potential turning point in the crisis.
Sir, we believe the primary targets are our nuclear silos and major population centers. We can scramble our bombers, but it might be too late. We need to act swiftly, but we must also be strategic. Every second counts.
The room was buzzing with controlled chaos, each person playing their part in the unfolding drama. Aides scurried back and forth, whispering urgent updates, their faces a mix of fear and determination. The president, however, felt a strange sense of calm descend upon him. Amid the chaos, he found clarity. He knew what he had to do. He had to act. And he had to act now, with resolve and precision. The fate of the world rested on his shoulders, and he was ready to bear that weight. The time for action had come.
Get me the Russian president on the hotline immediately. This is a matter of utmost urgency, and put me through to the National Emergency Broadcast System. We need to inform the public. I need to address the nation. This is a critical moment in our history. General, what's our current DEFCON status? I need a full report.
DEFCON 4, sir. We are on high alert, but not yet at the brink. We went to DEFCON 3 after the launch detection. The situation is escalating rapidly.
The DEFCON system, short for Defense Readiness Condition, is a graduated scale of alert used by the U.S. Armed Forces. DEFCON 5 was peacetime, a state of normalcy and calm, while DEFCON 1 meant nuclear war was imminent or already underway, a scenario of absolute chaos and destruction.
I want us at DEFCON 2. Prepare our retaliatory forces. We must be ready for any eventuality. But hold on my order. We need to be absolutely certain before we proceed. I need to speak with their leader first. Diplomatic channels must be exhausted.
He knew the gravity of his words. Every decision now carried immense weight. DEFCON 2 meant the U.S. military was on the brink of war, prepared to mobilize at a moment's notice, prepared to launch a counterattack within minutes. The stakes had never been higher. The atmosphere in the Situation Room was electric with tension. Every eye was on the president. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder with each passing second, amplifying the urgency. The president could feel the weight of millions of lives resting on his next words, his next decision. The pressure was immense. The hotline connected with a click, signaling the start of a crucial conversation, and a gruff voice boomed from the speakerphone, filled with authority and tension.
Mr. President, I hope you are well. We need to discuss the current crisis. I'm afraid we have a situation. The details are alarming.
The president's finger hovered over the nuclear launch button, a symbol of ultimate power and responsibility. His heart pounding in his chest. The gravity of the moment was palpable. His mind raced through the potential consequences of his actions. Every scenario played out in his head. The fate of the world hung in the balance. The next few moments would determine the course of history. The president drew a deep breath, trying to quell the wave of nausea rising in his throat. His mind flashed back to the infamous 1983 incident, when a Soviet officer, Stanislav Petrov, had correctly identified a false alarm of an incoming U.S. nuclear attack. Petrov's actions had saved the world from potential annihilation.
Dr. Kim, how reliable is our intel? Is there any chance this could be an error?
Sir, the data is conclusive. Multiple sources confirm the launches. Our satellites track the missiles from the moment they left their silos. This is not a drill.
The president's stomach churned. He had to trust his advisors. He had to trust the intelligence. But the weight of responsibility was crushing. The consequences of a mistake, of a miscalculation, were unimaginable.
Mr. President, even if we launch a counterattack, it won't stop all of their missiles. We'll be lucky if we can take out half of them, and their retaliation will be swift and devastating.
The president knew this. It was a chilling calculus of mutually assured destruction, a concept as old as the atomic age itself. He looked around the room, at the faces of his advisors, each etched with a mixture of fear and resolve. The president knew he had to speak to his people. He had to prepare them for the unthinkable. But first, he had to try one last, desperate gamble. He had to talk to the Russian president.
The Russian president's voice was surprisingly calm, almost conversational. Mr. President, I understand you have concerns, but I assure you, this is not an act of aggression. It's a matter of national security. We had to act. Act? You call this an act? Launching nuclear missiles at my country? You've pushed us to the brink. You have to call them back. You have to stop this madness. The Russian president chuckled, a chilling, empty sound. I'm afraid that's not possible, Mr. President. The missiles are already on their way. There's nothing more to be said. The line went dead.
The president stared at the red phone, his face pale, his hand trembling. The clock on the wall showed only 2 minutes remaining. The president turned to his advisors, his face a mask of despair. It's too late, he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. They're coming. The red light on the camera blinked, indicating a live feed. The nation held its breath, waiting for the words that would define this moment in history. The president took a deep breath and forced himself to look into the camera lens, into the homes of millions of Americans. His eyes reflected the weight of the world, the burden of leadership in such a dire time.
My fellow Americans, I come to you tonight with a heavy heart. The gravity of the situation we face cannot be overstated. At this very moment, our nation is under attack. The threat is real and imminent. Multiple nuclear missiles are headed towards our shores. Our defense systems have detected these threats, and we are doing everything in our power to intercept them. We have done everything in our power to prevent this tragedy, but to no avail. Our efforts, though valiant, have not been enough to stop the impending disaster. The next few minutes will be difficult. We must brace ourselves for the impact and the aftermath. I urge you to stay calm. In times of crisis, our strength lies in our unity and composure. Seek shelter if you can. Find a safe place and stay with your loved ones. Pray for our nation, for our world. God bless us all. In these moments, our faith and hope are our greatest allies.
He stepped away from the microphone, his shoulders slumped, his face etched with grief and resignation. The weight of his words hung in the air, a somber testament to the gravity of the situation. The clock ticked down the final seconds. Each tick echoed the urgency and the inevitability of the moment. The room was silent, save for the hum of the ventilation system and the frantic tapping of keyboards as aides tried desperately to relay instructions, to provide some semblance of order in the face of chaos. The tension was palpable, every second stretching into an eternity. The president closed his eyes. The image of the world map with its ominous red dots seared into his mind. Each dot represented a potential catastrophe, a point of no return. He didn't need to look at the clock to know the time was up. The sense of urgency was overwhelming, and the reality of the situation was undeniable. The blinding flash was followed by a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of the White House. The world outside dissolved into a maelstrom of fire and fury. The president and his advisors huddled together in the reinforced bunker beneath the White House. The only sound, the steady thrum of the ventilation system and the crackle of static from the dead communication lines. Days turned into weeks. The bunker became their tomb, a sterile, windowless prison. The air grew stale, thick with the stench of fear and uncertainty. The president, haunted by the ghosts of millions, clung to the tattered remnants of hope. Hope that somewhere, somehow, life endured. When the bunker doors finally creaked open, the world that greeted them was alien and unforgiving. The sky was a sickly gray, the air thick with radioactive dust. The once familiar landscape was now a desolate wasteland, scarred and broken. The president emerged from the rubble, his face covered in grime, his eyes filled with the horror of what he had witnessed. He knew that the world would never be the same. The nuclear firestorm had not only incinerated cities and vaporized millions, it had incinerated the old world order, the illusions of peace and security. He knew that he would be defined by this moment, by his decisions in those final, terrifying minutes. He knew that history would judge him harshly, and perhaps rightly so. The president stood on the precipice of a new world, a world forever marked by the shadow of nuclear war. The mantle of leadership had never felt heavier. He could only hope that humanity, somehow, would find a way to rebuild from the ashes. The president took a step forward into the unknown, carrying the weight of a shattered world on his shoulders. The future, bleak as it seemed, awaited.